Good morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. It's a Tuesday morning. I'm Ayo Makine. Of course, as you can see, guess who's back?
Oh, yes. I'm back like I never left. Because I never left, actually.
Oh, really?
Oh, I didn't leave.
Okay,
it's a beautiful Tuesday morning here in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Kayode Okikelu.
It's certainly good to see you, Kayode. Welcome back. Back like you never left, indeed. Yes, it's always been behind the scenes. Good morning from Abuja. I'm Maokpe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, one would wonder, well, this is going to be very difficult because we need to go straight to the papers, but it will be remiss of us not to mention, the information that is already in public domain about the killing of this 12-year-old boy at Darwin College, and the latest, of course, is that it is a lawyer, Mr. Femi Falana, has written to the Lagos Chief Coroner to begin an inquest into it. But circumstances that led to it definitely call for a lot of questions, Kaudi.
Absolutely. His death resonates with a lot of Nigerians, really. And not just people that have gone through that system, is it boarding school or school in general. A lot of Nigerians, who understand what it feels like to have been bullied and to be bullied right now. People feel bullied, is it by government at different levels, by the economy. Ironically, even Nigeria feels bullied. Recall the recent travel bans and all that. So bullying is something we see in different spheres on different levels. So you understand why a lot of Nigerians can relate with this. And that's why there's so much anger, so much call on governments to ensure that justice is done. Yes, there's a lot of investigations ongoing right now to find out exactly what happened, because that's what the family wants, justice. But, three things really come up for me. We need to now ensure, and when I say ensure, it's not just the usual ensure, we need to go deep down and ensure that our schools are safe. Yes, we need to do that. We have thousands of schools. We have millions of children in schools. And these children, the least we can do is ensure that they're protected. And I wonder the chain of reporting for issues such as this. And I think this is something we should also look into. When children report that they are bullied, yes, bullying is something we see time and again. But, if bullying goes to this extent and now it has led, according to reports, to the death of a child, then we need to ensure that, the chain of reporting is escalated. So, yes, report to the school, but ensure that it perhaps gets to the Ministry of Education. I hope that the ministry can have a setup to ensure that these issues are looked into properly and not swept under the carpet. And the second point, I won't be able to make the third point because of time, but the second point is, incidentally or coincidentally, as this was happening here in Nigeria, the US was also dealing with a school shooting, which involved a 15-year-old who had access to a gun. And for the first time in a long time, the parents are being charged with culpable manslaughter. I think that's it. And a lot of people were shocked. It wasn't the parents that shot the gun, but they gave the child the gun. And I think it speaks volumes. Parents should also have a role to play, or at least there should be consequences for, is it bad parenting or lack of it or whatever. Consequences. Maokpe.
Indeed, Kayode, I couldn't agree with you more, especially when you think of the stories that we're now beginning to hear, that a few parents are now beginning to withdraw their children. Parents whose children have been fingered in that incident are now trying to take their children either out of the school or out of the country or wherever it is they're trying to hide the children. Well, I think that they should get the memo that if, things do not go, if they're not able to get hands on the children to investigate them properly, that they too could be charged alongside the children when this case is eventually proven to have happened through bullying, because that is what is obvious right now. The inquest will only give concrete evidence to what has been suspected all along. It is a very, very very disturbing story, and I think that we really do owe our children an apology. We owe those who have been through this system for many years, where we have never really taken note or taken cognizance of bullying. Right now, we're doing 16 days of activism, talking about sexual and gender-based violence, how that has been a thing that empowers the oppressors and and keeps the vulnerable silent. There are many children who have been asking myself, how do we categorize this? Because this is also violence against, usually happens to boys and happens to girls, depending on the situation that you find yourself. But more often than not, boys seem to suffer the situation more. So I'm looking, for instance, at some of the pictures we're seeing on the front pages, which we will come to very soon. And if you put those same mottos on the issue concerning bullying, it would fit perfectly. I think that this should trigger a national conversation on how to handle this menace, particularly in our schools. We're not just protecting the schools from the outside, we also need to make the schools safe on the inside. Gentlemen.
Well, we could go on and on about this matter, but you know what? Let's just delve straight into the papers, because now that the investigation has started, we hope all angles will be covered, not just for now, but for the future yet to come. Papers after now. We begin with the Vanguard newspapers this morning, but first let's let you know that Wale Fatade joins us this morning. He is editor of The Conversation Africa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Ayo.
Well,
good morning, viewers.
The
Good
major.
to see you,
well, thank you. The major story still remains Omicron. It's on the front page. UK's ban unjust, punitive, discriminatory, FG declares, and quite a number of riders there insists vaccine inequality should be addressed, as Nigeria has enough vaccine to cover 70% of population by December 2020. Nigeria, South Africa should issue reciprocal travel restrictions on the UK. Others, as ascribed to Mogalu, ban on African countries unfair, discriminatory, says additional. US demands 24 hours negative COVID test from foreign travelers. Omicron not as deadly as previous variants, says Medical Guild. National Assembly will insist on prudent use of COVID-19 funds, says President of the Senate. Mr. Fatadi.
Now, where do we start? it's obvious, and I feel so much for the colleagues at Vanguard having to merge or lump all of those things together. They are related, but then some salient stock will be lost in the midst of the chaos or the confusing stories. But I think it's obvious. The ban is not it's not based on science. Apparently, we have not had. And you know, until it came to light, it was a group of Dutch officials or envoys that were in South Africa that actually brought Omicron to Africa. That was how it happened. And South Africa just did what they should do by reporting it globally. The WHO has a system whereby you report the variant you might have discovered in your own country. That's one. Number two, as the Medical Guild said, science has shown again that this variant is not as deadly as Delta or the other variants. So you know there are many variants. So why then are you now saying people should not come? Now, lastly, for me, Europe is actually facing a severe wave of COVID infection now. We've seen it in Germany, we've seen it in Austria, we've seen it in Belgium, we've seen it in Netherlands. So, and those ones have not been banned. It's purely racism. And I don't think appealing. I was watching the Minister of Health. I think it was on your station on Sunday night, Dr. Yanire, talking that the federal government was not considering travel ban. And I said, it is not his call. Because apparently, the call Britain made was not based on science. And so that would be the remit of the Foreign Affairs Minister. And I think we need a kind of, what's that word now, retaliatory action. Because it's not based on science, sincerely. And we have now seen, it was very few people that were talking when South Africans were banned from coming to UK. Now it has come to us. So Africans need to have a concerted effort or a concerted action against Britain.
Well, the conversation is unending, it will seem.
Yeah.
But there's this one right above the nameplate, ultimatum. You'll hear from us in 24 hours. ASUU tells Nigerians.
I was listening to a radio station as I drove here, and I found that very painful. Fine. I got friends who are professors. I got family members who are teaching. My sister, my cousin. So I'm sure most likely they are watching this. They know where I stand on ASUU strike. And I mean, Kayode is laughing. I've expressed it there. It's one strike too many. I agreed, and I know that our federal government have been serious breaker of promises, of agreement. There's no doubt about that. The one day, now the minister was saying, was it last year or early this year, that the government does not have money to pay. But have you called these guys back to renegotiate? So, and I think it is sad that we have had a lot of disruption. I was talking to a professor friend on Sunday night, and he told me the University of Ibadan was ending the 2020-21 session this December. They just started second semester exams. So and I said, Prof, which one are you starting? He said it's 2021, 2022 in January. So how does that one end? Now when you have another strike, I think all things must be done. As bad as our National Assembly is, and they are really bad in some instances, I think they have stepped in. And I hope their efforts will yield success.
And I also hope your family and friends who are lecturers will allow you at the table this Christmas.
Oh no, they have no
voice
choice.
your opinion.
And you know, some of those tables I'll be at the head, so they just have to join me.
Okay. Well, the Guardian newspaper is next, and as you'd expect, leads with this travel ban and the apartheid. FG Adesina Ishola, that's Nigeria's High Commissioner to UK, slammed UK's travel ban. And a host of writers really just goes to paint that picture. And you've tried to touch on those issues. But take a look at this one right below the nameplate. It's in red, actually, as though it tries to give, some sort of prominence to the story. Nigeria's trade deficit rises to 3 trillion naira. So essentially that means that we're importing more than we're exporting.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've talked about diversification, right? I mean, we import a lot of PMS. Ideally, that's where a lot of our dollars.
That's a major importation.
Exactly, and we've talked about this diversification time and again. We need to not be import driven as an economy. And I just wonder, is this the part where they say it gets worse before it gets good?
I really wish it's as optimistic as you have tried to put it. I was just scrolling through my archives, and I saw the spokesperson to the federal government, or to the president, our senior colleague, Mr. Adesina, who said in 2015 that we will stop importing in 2019. And this is December 2021. The question remains, what has happened that we can't get all our refineries working? We just have to answer that, because a large chunk of that importation is PMS, premium motor spirit, petrol to the gentleman on the street. And then look at what has happened with cooking gas as well. And so we find out that the importation is majorly in the energy sector, and this could be breached. Now we are waiting for the Dangote refinery. So we can't do anything but that. And that's where you see basic economics, balance of trade, balance of payment, we are always in deficit. That's all.
Oh dear. A couple of other stories, really spoiled for choice. But let's take this to Abuja now and see what Markwe has for us. Markwe.
Well, let's take a look at leadership, and they have this one on the front page. Controversy trails 42 billion naira NAS complex renovation contract. Excuse me, that's their lead story. A little more detail. Contractor has no record of previous jobs. Official address untraceable. Original builders bid 27 billion naira but was overlooked. Reps deny underhand dealing in contract award. Award of contract followed due process, that's according to BPP. No contract has been awarded, says FCDA, and FEC to decide on project tomorrow. Remind you again of the headline. Controversy trails 42 billion naira NAS complex renovation contract. So that's the lead story on the front page of leadership. I don't know if you would like to comment on it, sir.
Honestly, I will feel like the Yoruba man who said that I don't know what to say. I'm serious. Because you see a beautiful story, even reading going by the headlines alone, by the headline rather, and the writers, of the story the reporter have done, saying that it has been awarded. But why is it being denied that it's not been awarded? And for the Bureau of Public Procurement saying the contract followed due process without inspecting the head office address, I think normal government contract in Nigeria, you have to show, is it 2 or 3 years tax payment? I mean, without having a physical address, and you want to renovate National Assembly? What shall we say to these things again? Nothing more.
Well, let's take a look at this one. Perhaps you'll have a clearer comment on this one. Prime Minister NERC intervene as AEDC workers shelve strike. Or yesterday there was a strike action which started, and parts of Abuja, if not the entire city, was thrown into darkness yesterday. But thankfully, by night time, the electricity was restored. But this is the story. Prime Minister NERC intervened as AEDC workers shelve strike. Well, the question I wanted to ask is, do you think that it is right that when workers who work in very sensitive sector down tools, should they punish everybody else alongside their grievance? I don't know. Do you think it is fair?
Yeah, without having full detail of the strike or the proposed strike, I think we must remember that workers in every sector, they have families as well. And so if their working conditions have not been met based on their employment stuff, they have every right to go on strike. That's where I stand. The right to unionize, the right to go on strike by workers worldwide has been established by the ILO, of which we are signatory to. So you take care of them. We must emphasize that right. But I think for you guys in Abuja, good enough that you are able to have power supply back now. And thank God for that intervention. But we cannot abjugate the right of workers to go on strike. No.
So the question isn't about whether they have a right to go on strike. It's about whether they should shut down everything when they go on strike. That's the question.
Okay, let them go on strike and leave the supply lines open. But that could be dangerous, because if there is no regulation. So the thing we must ask is, how come the communication has broken down that they are not going on strike? I believe they must have served notice, whether it's 3 weeks or 21 days or 1 month notice. The same thing we have had with ASUU. People that are supposed to monitor this thing or to take action don't take action. Why waiting until the last minute? Last minute preparation always gives room for issues like this. That's all. Again, I said I do not have the detail of what is going on there. Remember, is it about 3 weeks or 4 weeks back, railway workers were on strike in Nigeria. The trains were not working. So what happened?
Let's leave it there for leadership newspaper.
Daily Independent has this one and is perhaps even talking a little more about investments. Insecurity won't stop investors coming to Nigeria. That's ascribed to who? Presidency. What's your take on that?
I don't know. It was a former secretary of the government who told us years back that who is the presidency. So we need to be sure which presidency said this. The president himself, any of the staff. Every time you drive on the streets of Lagos or Abuja, you see car number plates, the presidency, the presidency. So I don't know what the person has been reading, because that's contrary to official statistics.
I recently saw, I think, an ID card of an INEC worker, and he had, I think, the presidency on it as well.
Yeah, because INEC is actually under presidency at certain
Well, this is actually from the spokesperson to the president, Mr. Femi Adesina.
So that's the presidency.
Yeah, that's the presidency now. So I don't know the statistics my other brother has been reading, but that's not true. That's not correct. Things are not as glamorous as they will. We can't see what has happened. The South African companies have left in drones in the last 2 years. Sincerely, check that. So people are actually moving their funds. Remember,
can you tie that to insecurity? That's the question.
Well, because the economy is not moving. Now, there was a beautiful article I read by a Nigerian professor in US talking about how we are paying more for food, and how sadly it is not the farmers that are benefiting. That the chunk of higher prices for food, which all of us know, goes to transportation costs. Because the vehicles buy diesel, and the farmers cannot farm because they are paying toll, or they are paying taxes, whatever way you call it, to insurgents. And so we are paying the price.
Is it possible that the presidency has some information Nigerians don't?
Maybe. But then we don't deal with just stats alone or figures. We deal with actualities. I mean, we know how many of our people are roaming the streets for unemployment. And so if those investments are coming in, do they translate into higher employment figures?
It's interesting that Mr. Femi Adesina himself is a journalist such as yourself, so maybe...
Yeah, it's possible that there are facts he has that we don't have. I consider that.
Well, right under the picture you see there, same COVID-19 Omicron story. FG kicks against restrictions imposed on Nigerian travelers, says vaccines to cover 70% of population available. That's the Daily Independent this morning.
Well, there's talk about investment as well on the front page of the New Telegraph, but from a different perspective, and this concerns the travel restriction, travel ban, whichever you want to call it. But New Telegraph calls it travel ban. OPS economists raise the alarm over investment disruptions, predicts recession in Q1 2022, foresee drop in FDIs again, investment. Cost of production to rise, investors, Nigerian carriers brace up for massive flight cancellations, and it goes on and on. But this is not about insecurity. This is on the travel ban and the economy at large, pages 2, 3, and 8. And, well, this is something we began with, the Down College incident. You see, family demands coroner's inquest on Sylvester's death. And I mean, I imagine that millions of Nigerians also are joining their voice. I imagine Mr. Fatade as well, also joining your voice to that.
Yeah, I'm a parent, and nothing is much more painful and sorrowful than losing one's child. Also, losing a child in such terrible circumstances. So my condolences first to the family who have lost their child. But I think basically what we have seen, and I think we need to be careful of this mob or hysteria action. Boarding houses are not evil entirely, and I must put that there. I've had a son that went through boarding house and it didn't turn out worse. I've had siblings that were in boarding house, they didn't turn out worse. I've had incredible number of friends who are boarders. But I think what we are dealing with is the failure of regulation at all levels. The school, though, and college itself fail in its regulation. Then, my own father is a retired teacher. There used to be the inspectorate division in schools. Are they still working? And I was checking some statistics yesterday. We have more private schools now in Lagos at all levels than public schools. So the quality assurance department in the Lagos State Ministry of Education, is it still functioning? And then, so who track all those things? In a normal society, the rating of schools will be displayed that Wale Secondary School has this rating, Kayode Secondary School has this rating. But do we have those things now? And then
still has them for public schools.
But what about the private schools? And so if I want to make a decision as a father whose child is about going to secondary school, and by the way, is the most critical level of school, I found it from experience. Primary school, you can get the ones good close by in your house, but secondary school, most expensive in Lagos. And before you get the correct one, you have to search and search. What are the parameters with which a would-be parent or a parent will make or will use to decide those schools? And then until this family, until they approach Mr. Falana, who was investigating the issue? The commissioner of police told us nobody has made a formal report. And so, does it fall under the police? Does it fall under the social welfare department? Does it fall under Ministry of Education? Not just sealing the school. So, regulation is a problem in this country. Who is regulating who in this matter? Now, who has been asked to come for questioning by any government institution? Who is looking to it? Where is the NUT? Are those teachers in those private schools, are they allowed to be members of NUT? Where are they allowed to be? There is what is called all Nigerian Conference of Principals of Secondary Schools. Is the principal of Dowen or those elitist colleges, are they members of those things? And so there are several levels of regulation that have failed. What happened to the PTA? And I hope people know, some of these fanciful schools, the PTA is just to be an appendage. The school my own children attend or attended, nothing of that will ever happen. The PTA must be a kind of check and balance on the school authority, but we don't have that now. And then we have this level of parenting whereby you warehouse parenting. You are not really parents. You just outsource your parenting duties, and these are part of the failure. It's so bad and very sad because a life has been lost. And you remember the one you mentioned, where parents have now been charged for culpable manslaughter. Who the parents of these children, allegedly who are responsible for the death of this guy, what is happening to them? Has anybody been called for questioning? It's how many hours now?
There's so many angles.
So many angles to talk about.
So many angles to
which
this.
shows our failure of systemic failure at all levels.
About this whole thing, because at the end of the day, what matters here is, just as the father of the little boy has requested, justice.
Not justice in that sense, my brother. The question that we should be thinking about, or what should concern us, is how do we prevent future happening? We say it in Abuja. We say it in several schools.
We began this program by going into that and asking that all angles need to be covered of this issue, because if we just allow it to go without dealing with it, it's just a start. But for now, we have to thank you very much for being a part of our program this morning. Wale Fatade is former assistant managing editor, Next Newspaper, as well as commissioning editor of the Conversation Africa. Thank you again for your time.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Sunrise Daily continues right after now. Please stay with us.
Omicron variant.
A visibly unhappy Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, intimates Nigerians understand of the federal government on the blacklisting of Nigeria by the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom added Nigeria to its red list category as it tightens travel restrictions in an effort to limit the spread of the Omicron COVID-19 variant, few days after Canada imposed same sanction on Nigeria. The implication, according to the UK government, means that Nigerians who do not have UK citizenship or residence permit can no longer gain entry into the UK until the travel advisory is reversed. The minister condemns this move and calls for a rethink.
The decision by the British government to put Nigeria on the red list just because of less than 2 dozen cases of Omicron, which, by the way, did not originate in Nigeria, is unjust, unfair, punitive, indefensible, and discriminatory.
Alhaji Mohammed is of the opinion that what the UK government should be looking at is how to ensure access to vaccine and not an outright travel ban.
Many developed countries have used the advantage of their enormous resources, relationship to sign agreements with manufacturers to supply their countries with vaccines ahead of making them available for use by other countries. This is the real issue to address instead of choosing the easy path of travel bans.
At a separate event, the chairman of the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 responds to the ban.
The British government have decided to add Nigeria to the red list. We are reviewing that, we are looking at it, and Nigeria will respond appropriately. We would meet over it and look at all the issues that have been raised, and a response will come out of that.
The federal government insists that the COVID-19 pandemic has been properly managed by Nigeria and as such should be commended for its efforts so far.
Well, that's the main issue we're sinking our teeth into this morning. We've given you a background. There's been a lot of reaction to the travel restrictions imposed by the United Kingdom, especially, and Canada. And you have heard from the Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, and you've also heard the reaction of the Secretary to the government of the Federation, and the federal government is still studying, even though oftentimes when the minister speaks, we believe he's speaking for the federal government. There have been a few other reactions which were not captured in that report. The Nigeria's ambassador to the UK, Sarafa Ishola, said that this is travel apartheid, while the president of the AFDB, that's Mr. Kinwumi Adesina, also issued a pretty strongly worded tweet saying that singling out African countries is very unfair, non-scientific and discriminatory. But the United Kingdom is still saying that what they're doing is in line, to study the situation while knowing more about the COVID-19 Omicron variant. Well, we have a few heavyweights to weigh into the issue this morning. We have with us this morning Professor Jidofo Adibe, who is a professor of political science and international relations, because this borders on diplomatic relations as well. We have Mr. Tokwe Fashua, who is an economist, weighing in on the issue. And we also have a consultant public health physician, Dr. Mosiwe Maduka, who is joining us via Zoom. Gentlemen, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Prof, let me start with you. When Omicron, the variant, was by the South African authorities and South African scientists, that they had noticed this new variant, did you see this, will I say, restriction, this new restriction coming to Africa as a whole, and perhaps Nigeria in particular?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there's been a bit of, in my own opinion, a bit of overreaction on the part of Nigerians and Africa. Let me correct one impression. It's not only the United Kingdom that has imposed restrictions on Nigeria. Cambodia has done that. Chile has done that. Several countries, it's not just the UK. And it is important that as much as we are emotional, about feeling isolated, will I use the word discriminated? Not exactly in my opinion. We have to look at the broader context. The earlier variants, the beta variants and the Delta and the Beta variants, they claimed 5 million lives. And in the Western world, there were a lot of blames going around that the government responded quicker than they did, that the situation would have been stemmed. Remember, it was until it got to India, the Indian wave, that many countries rose up. So in the face of this variant coming from Southern Africa, Dr. Anthony Fauci, of the US CDC, said it would take about 2 weeks for scientists to even understand it, to know about its transmissibility, whether it is contagious or not. So what many governments did was to take proactive measures. UK imposed this restriction on 11 countries, including Nigeria. And the reason it mentioned Nigeria, in my own opinion, was because they said in Canada, the one that was discovered there was linked to Nigerians who traveled. Is it fair that only African countries? Perhaps not, because they were also, it's been detected in some other European countries and they were not affected. But is it enough for us to conclude that it is racist? I don't think so. In the earlier variants, Nigeria was on amber list, and several countries like Spain, Italy were on red list. And if you want to use the racist argument, why is it only Nigeria, Ghana, and several other countries in West, were actually the only country in West Africa, were actually the only country from a non-Southern African country to be on that list? So it's not enough for us to conclude that it's a racist move. I think we should be very careful not to wear our blackness, Africanness in a negative sense, as a badge. In fact, in the Western world, they call it third worldism, whereby you periscope, you use as your filter all this your black identity, to do anything. I think it was wrong, in my own opinion, the choice of words by Alhaji Lai Mohammed and our High Commissioner to the UK. Even if you felt it was a discrimination, as a High Commissioner or a diplomat, I would expect a different form of language. Remember, we say, who is a diplomat? A diplomat is somebody who can ask you, go to hell, and you'll be looking forward to when the journey will start. So you will have used a different form of language. It will not be impossible for him to seek for a meeting with higher officials to explain why should Nigeria be included in this list, instead of grandstanding, which is not unlikely to make them change their mind.
Well, I would like to get your, I do not know from what perspective you'll be acting. I'm looking at the economic, because we have, our international relations expert has pointed out the fact that this is not exactly targeted at just Nigeria. A few other African countries are on the list, and that, you know, it's not just the UK that has done that. We have relations with a few other countries that have eventually done that. But we know that we have pretty strong relations with the United Kingdom. We have strong economic ties. We have strong, should we say, filial affiliations with the United Kingdom. A lot of our people are citizens over there. We have a very vibrant Nigerian community that goes back and forth between both, you know, countries. So economically speaking, I mean, this COVID-19 has affected a lot of things. The other day, we're looking at the price of oil, and people were wondering what Omicron will do to the price of oil. So economically speaking, as an economist, first, how do you rate these travel restrictions, and how do you view the emergence of Omicron, the variant?
Well, thank you very much. I think that I kind of align with the accumulationers of this world. I don't know which words Lai Mohammed has used and the other guys, you know, but I pretty much align with them because I think the overreaction, okay, so if we have overreacted in Africa, especially in Nigeria, it must also be said that it's because of an overreaction by these other countries, not only the UK, up to Canada and so on. The mere detection of a new variant without actually even trying to find out. There's a certain woman called Dr. Angelique Kwezi in South Africa. She's like the head of their own medical council. And she was the first person that actually discovered this with a patient. And I understand that South Africa has some of the best laboratories in the world, you know. And all of that just gets swept aside because it's seen that Africa is a dispensable continent. See, we may have issues, right? And we know all our issues, but I don't think that we should put ourselves down for anybody. And if not for anything, for our children and the children yet unborn, perhaps they will do better than we. And so we must preserve our remaining dignity for those children that are coming behind us. If anyone thinks that Africa, what do we want from them? You know, I mean, these guys, we don't have to listen to their scientists. If not many people have died in Nigeria, in Africa, as projected, nobody's even asking for that data to say, okay, look, you know, maybe about 3,000 people have died of COVID in Nigeria, a bit less than that. Now, but why? Are you sure that data is correct? Okay, let us interrogate the data. Let us see, maybe it's not 3,000, maybe it's 10,000. Okay, why is it not in the millions as expected? You know, so again, we're in another slavery era whereby, you know, your opinions don't count and you have been mentally usurped, as it were. You know, so now when we talk about the economic angle of it, economies are trying so hard to recover. We know for almost a year last year, we were shut down, the entire world. Economies are trying to crawl out. Our economy is largely informal, but to a large extent, we are also still connected. Like, for example, the UK, we have loads of people in the UK who are Nigerians. Nigerians are always going back and forth. That affects the economy of Nigeria. If we are struggling to get ourselves, in spite of all the problems we have, in spite of the fact that, yes, we complain about government not doing enough, we complain about corruption, people are just trying to survive. And then you have this kind of thing, shut down, summary shut down, a kind of discrimination, actually. Like, people just begin to feel, oh, they just don't want us there. And I say again, it's because people believe that the African economy is relatively small and can be dispensed with so easily. Otherwise, between the UK and the US, these guys have millions of people who have died in these two countries. If you add them together, there are more than 1 million that have died in these two countries. Have they banned each other? Do they know what the variants are what? The existing variants, have we actually covered it? Are people not dying even in spite of, double vaccination, triple, quadruple vaccination? People are still dying. Maybe this is something we'll have to live with. Now, I have a theory that, on the economic front, okay, this is what I think is happening. There's a need for these countries to slow down the rise of the price of crude. If you remember that, like just on November 11th, the price of crude oil got to as high as $83, $85. As we speak now, it's down to 70. It went down to about 65 a couple of days back. And I think that, you know, this is a good opportunity which they latched onto. Oh, new variant has come. Oh, okay. No, let's just take a decision that's going to like slow down the world again. So everybody starts to, you know, be very frightful and all of that. And of course, the price of crude oil, because the price of crude oil was driving inflation in those countries. And that's very critical. In the United States, for example, you know, gas prices were going sky high. Inflation in every other goods was coming up. There was a supply chain crisis whereby they were thinking about how to even deliver Christmas things to their people. It was going to be a riot. People were, you know, and then, of course, so the point is, would they allow crude oil prices to get to 140 where it was in 2006? Anything they can do to buy some time to see. And of course, that also begins to make people look at the argument on green energy and all of that, which is the next agenda, what they're driving now. Green energy, let's forget about investment in crude oil, in gas, and all of that. And I'll close so that you can speak that there's a certain article in a German newspaper that says the virus from Africa is with us. And they use the image of a poor woman with a child peeping out of a hut somewhere in Africa. And you say the virus from Africa is with us. Come on. We need to speak up. If it's racism, let's call it racism what it is. And let's also begin to look inward to say, rather than going to all of these other countries, can we also retaliate and also stop them from coming here? We still have something of value, no matter how little it is. And we need to preserve that thing that's of value. And of course, let's think about what we can do for ourselves.
Well, Prof, you know, has said that there seems to be an overreaction. I'm trying to see if we can get some medical intervention into this. I do not know if our guest who's joining us via Zoom is ready. But I believe that if the guest is ready, the guest will pop up very soon. But if not, okay, so we'll continue our conversation here.
Let me just say...
Prof, let me come back to you.
Okay.
You know, part of the criticism that has greeted this restriction is that it is non-scientific. It is not based on science. If they're saying, oh, you know, give us time to study this new variant, but we also heard not quite long after South Africa, you know, raised the alarm over Omicron, we heard the Netherlands come forward to say they noticed this variant first. In fact, they had reported to the WHO first. Even the WHO has said the move which a lot of Western countries were about to take on Omicron in terms of restricting travel from the countries that have already reported Omicron was not going to help the science of it, because what they're trying to do is encourage countries to come out and report when they notice a mutation, a variant which they have noticed in their country. This certainly is not going to help that move. Don't you agree?
Thank you very much. First, I think we should put certain things in their boxes. The first is that nobody is denying the existence of institutional racism. It's there. And we have to isolate and know when to respond to what is racism, especially in its institutional manifestation. Now, the most drastic measure, if you hear, for example, given what has happened about the COVID-19, which there remain controversies about them, about the whole virus, even whether vaccination is effective or not. Given what has happened, if a country understands that a new variant has emerged, what do? You respond. Now, the question is, how has Nigeria responded? The most drastic response did not come from the UK. The most drastic came from Morocco, which banned all forms of in-flight to the country. You can't fly into Morocco, starting from Tuesday today. Then Angola closed this border with Southern Africa because it's where it was isolated. Rwanda has banned flights. So there must be a response mechanism in order to protect your population. Remember, they all said 2-week frame, because that was Dr. Anthony Fauci, still regarded as the authority on infectious disease. He said it will take about 2 weeks for scientists to understand whether it posed any danger. But so far that it seemed to be mild. So what do you do in such an instance? You do not fold your arms. You do not say, well, nothing will happen. What you have to take a measure. What is the response of Nigeria? That's what, instead of coming around and grandstanding and isolating, yes, there is institutional racism. We all know that. But instead of doing that, it would have been more useful, in my own opinion, to say, in respect of this new variant, we do not know whether it poses a danger, but this is government's response. Rwanda has done that, Egypt has done that, Angola has done that, small Fiji, many countries have taken measures. What is Nigeria's measure? So if you are proactive to protect your population, and another is reactive, just responding to your response, it is a failure of leadership. What Nigerians are interested in, if this new variant turns out to be dangerous, what measures have you put in place?
So when we're in a bind, I mean, I'm sure you certainly were following events on the international scene. The week when South Africa announced this variant, Omicron, was also the week, a week shortly after, we're expecting the South African president, who was doing a tour of West African states. Yeah. Could we really have said then that at that point was when we were going to be putting travel restrictions on South Africa?
No, I'm saying, for example, it is not fair. There's one point we say, it's probably not fair that the other countries that have reported Western European countries are not included in the list. So in one way, it is discriminatory that you listed 11 on the part of Britain. It's Britain that did that. If you look at some countries, they did comprehensive. In fact, Spain has just said they were not going to admit anybody from UK. So for UK's measure, we can pose a legitimate question, even at the level of High Commissioner, why only African countries? Why are you not including Belgium, Germany, Netherlands that has even identified 27? Why only us? You can pose this as a legitimate question.
So if that, I mean,
but you cannot use that to conclude.
Yes.
I'm saying the racist allegation. We know there's an institutional, and you cannot use that as a conclusion to say it is racist, because they can counter argue. Look, if it is racist, I've not included Ghana. If it is racist, other countries are not included, so you cannot say we're racist. If it is racist, why come that during the Beta and Delta, Nigeria was on amber and several European countries were on red? So we have to be able to put things in their boxes and then address them squarely. That's the argument I was trying to make.
Yeah, but you have already made the counter argument as well. How do we excuse the counter argument?
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
It is Britain that did that. It's not exactly all the measures. I've given you an example. Spain is not allowing Britain to come in.
No, but one can understand Spain, because, I mean, Spain has seen, has held the short end in this crisis. They've seen massive deaths, perhaps even more deaths than the UK. At some point, Spain and Italy were competing in terms of the number of people that they lost owing to COVID-19. So you would imagine that Spain will be extra careful when it comes to any new variants being introduced into their own country. But where...
So, in other words, you also agree that a country has a right to be able to be proactive. That's the conclusion from your argument.
Indeed.
But so we are looking at this in terms of being proactive.
Yes.
Then we say you are. Yes, we can understand you are being proactive, given what has happened, and that 5 million people lost their lives. Then we can come down to the next level. But why are you not including in this travel ban all these European countries, the Netherlands and
that's
others?
Basically where we are. So that's a question. If the Netherlands already reported that they saw this particular variant, the same variant, not another one, the same Omicron that they had reported to the WHO, and they were just a week away from the WHO announcing it, as a new variant, acknowledging that it was a new variant. Why would it be that a lot more African countries were affected? Do you think that there is another reason why Nigeria was included, even though it was not in Nigeria that this...
They said the one that was identified, according to them, and that's what we should have interrogated. The one in Canada said it was linked to 2 Nigerians, 2 people, and another country said 2 people have been in Nigeria. And that was why the health minister, British health minister, said Nigeria is only next to South Africa. This is something we can question. As I say, I'm not defending, we cannot defend the idea that it's only African countries, because European countries have also mentioned the thing. But whether they have a right to be proactive in protecting their... I would like to see Nigeria, for example, announce a travel ban. Morocco announced a travel ban. Why are we not announcing it? Angola did the same. Rwanda did the same.
Well, I mean, there'll be arguments for and against that, because, I mean, the WHO is not exactly in support of travel restrictions. But let me come to you, Mr. Fashua, because some people will say, I mean, they would certainly support Prof's point that we haven't done our own housekeeping. And there have been questions as to our surveillance system, because there'll be questions as to why it is that neighboring Ghana, for instance, you know, is not on that list, and why it is that Nigeria is featuring very prominently, has now moved from amber to red, even though the virus did not originate from Nigeria.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, of course, we know our lapses. I was in Ghana about a month ago, and if you went into the Kotoka airport today, you probably will think you're flying into Dubai. Not only in terms of the ambience, which is there, and the well-organized whatever, but everybody that goes into Ghana gets tested for COVID, and you get your result before you leave the airport. And you know, it's even Dubai airport, where I've been a couple of times recently, you have to, when you get to your hotel, you may get your result like 3 hours later and so on. But in Ghana, you will get the result before you leave, and they're able to do that. People pay. So you come here and all they do is beg in the airport. All they do is beg. When I traveled to Lagos, I came and wrote an article about this. I've been tagging President Oshibajo, tagging Adi Sirika, the nonsense that's going on in our airport. So invariably, we know all that issue. However, look, I'm an economist.
We cannot dismiss that issue.
No, we're not dismissing it. Yes. We're not dismissing it. That could perhaps qualify Nigeria beyond Ghana for any of such a thing. But what about South Africa? Equally well organized, equally well funded, great laboratories and so on. But the illogicality of what has happened is what? Illogicality number one, the fact that, you know, despite the fact that Netherlands and others have reported, the UK says, oh, we are our brothers, you can come. But these other guys, they look a bit smelly. You know, and we need to stand up for ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Number one, illogicality. Number two, the fact that, look, as we're speaking right now, you know, how many people have died in Nigeria of COVID? How much has it affected the whole of Africa? It's a lot less. And so in statistics, you extrapolate and say, okay, even if it's worse than we are reporting, but how bad can it be?
So should we say
the illogicalities are so many.
Is it the countries then that are showing apartheid, or is this how COVID too? Maybe COVID too.
No, you see, COVID actually, that's the first thing.
It has attacked the countries.
Yes, no. You see, the point is this. COVID actually gave a blank check to governments to do and undo, all right? There's been corruption, massive embezzlement, not only in Nigeria. You saw the minister of state for economic planning in Port Harcourt a couple of days back, and inspecting this teaching hospital who they had given 950 million, and there wasn't anything on ground. So not only in Nigeria, but everywhere else in the world, it's giving them a blank check to do and undo. And so the knee-jerk reaction is what people are talking about now. You have to have a basis in logic for the decision you're taking. We can't afford to close our economy because we understand how our people need to come out of all of that COVID lockdown, all of that, economic shutdown and all of that, and survive.
I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts. Let's quickly take this to Lagos now. They have questions for you. Gentlemen.
So, I mean, just listen to gentlemen in Abuja, a lot of questions, and it's funny that these things overlap. But let me just start from Mr. Fasua. I'll go to Prof in a moment. And this is for a lot of people who are trying to perhaps understand the context of all of this, how big or otherwise this is. You said earlier that Nigeria's economy is largely informal. And for a lot of people, when they hear that, I mean, there's travel restriction to foreign countries, I mean, people in the informal sector, that is, they quite perhaps cannot understand because maybe their business does not involve them having to travel or transact business as much because, as you said, is largely informal. So just how huge a blow is this travel restriction dealing to the economy? So maybe we can understand at least another box, as Prof put it. Let's try to put this in different boxes. So for the economy, how big a blow is this dealing?
So again, the crude oil is our mainstay, all right? Though it has become a liability to Nigeria, plus or minus, head or tail, we seem to be losing the crude oil game. However, the recovery, if we were, and anyhow, all of us also have things to contribute. Even you guys that are press people, media people, you're doing a lot. We have got to that point in Nigeria where we can't depend on political leadership anymore. Everybody seems to be leading themselves, and all of us are leading Nigeria. That's the way I look at it. So now imagine that crude oil price would have attained 100 or 120. And the government would have been under pressure from the media, from people like us who are not in government. And listen, that you have to show us how this is impacting on Nigerian economy, and it will. In the Yaradua days when crude oil got to 140, Nigeria felt it. That was when our reserves went up to $62 billion. And that's the highest we've ever obtained. As we see now that Nigeria's reserves have been accreting, we got to about $42 billion and so on. It's gone down a little bit now, So that would have helped us. Now, the whole idea of shutting down this mass hysteria, which is also part of it. The problem some of us have with COVID is that it's been driven by fear. And you don't achieve anything by driving anything by fear. Drive it by logic and let people take logical decisions. That's one. On the informality of the economy, which is also very, very important and very critical. Remember, a lot of our people are farmers, people who go to the market, people who survive by the day and all of that. Okay, so fine. We locked these people down, even in their poverty, for almost the whole of 2020, which was a year that people had planned that, look, this was my year of this, my year of that. So 2020 was my turnaround and all of that. It happened to be the total opposite of what people were planning. And now they're trying to come out. People had postponed their weddings, their celebrations, everything they wanted to do. That's what we are. That's who we are. People were going to come from abroad and bring in an inflow of resources, of foreign currencies into this country. This is December. And then this begins to happen. A lot of our people, and look, there's that filial, as Marcus said, that filial relationship that we have with Britain. They need to respect that. And we're the biggest country in Africa. We are. And a lot of our people are there adding value to the British economy. All right, and this is the time. So they needed to have checked that. What could they have done? What could they have done? They could have liaised more with the South African authorities. Say, what exactly was it you saw? No, they're saying that this is mild. Oh, it seems like it doesn't matter whether it's mild or not. In fact, this Omicron has now been positioned, and people are watching that it's the kind of the virus that actually puts an end to everything, because it is mild. It has several indications showing that people, in fact, it's the indication of that herd immunity that the world has attained. I've read so many articles about that in the last few days, and that must be. So how come they now decided not to be scientific? I mean, you just wake up and you say what you want to do is shut down some people from coming to your economy. It's racist. It's discriminatory.
Mr. Faso,
discriminatory is uncalled for.
Right. I understand that COVID-19 has turned a lot of us into scientists. I mean, visiting Lancet, Nature, just trying to check some of the updates. But, regarding this variant, it's still too early as a scientist. Perhaps I should say the real scientists have said. But still a lot of issues to unpack. And I'd like you gentlemen to please stay with us. We'll go on a quick break and we'll come back in a moment. Welcome back. So quite a lot of things at play here. There's diplomacy, public opinion, there's politics, but at the root of it all, perhaps, is science. And we're joined on the program just to, extend this conversation and get the science or the scientific angle to this by Dr. Mosiwe Maduka, who is a consultant public health physician, also the National Publicity Secretary, Association of Public Health Physicians of Nigeria, and immediate past head, Department of Community Medicine, University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital. She joins us via Zoom. You saw her briefly from Port Harcourt. Well, Dr. Maduka, good to have you on the program. So, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the economic angle, the diplomatic angle, foreign relations, and the rest. But we'd like to talk about the science of it all. And let me just ask you, in terms of, reducing transmission, just what does science say about travel restrictions and how it affects transmission? Does it drive it down? Does it increase it? Or does not have any effect at all? What's the science behind all of this? So we'll try to sort the technology behind all of this first before we get the science behind this. So we'll try to reconnect with Dr. Madika. But let me take this back to our Abuja studio and ask Prof. We've seen different countries with different responses. The US, for example, for other foreigners says you can come in, but you need to get tested. Okay, you need to get tested. We need to be sure that you don't have it, and then go through the normal process. In fact, the UK will listen to the Secretary of Health, or the Minister of Health, in the case saying that UK citizens or residents can come in. They'll get tested and they'll go through the normal procedure, which is what we've had in place all the while. So apparently, people will tell you there's an alternative to this, okay? There's a way you can do this without necessarily saying stay away. I mean, are you saying that the citizens or residents might not test positive for it? Yes, they might, but there's a procedure, a process in place. So is that too much to ask for, to say, how about we just maintain what we have been doing, which, by the way, has proven to be effective?
I agree with you. I actually myself was quarantined when I was there in June for 10 days. People can raise questions, but I like the way you framed it, that this is something that has been existing. What's the need now to say only residents and citizens can come in? We can take up that and raise that conversation, whether it's going to make any difference. As you also rightly pointed out, different countries chose different paths. Morocco, as I said, banned all incoming flights from anyone. And some closed borders. Rwanda too is banning flights. So, as you said, the science behind all this, now, the real science, because we all becoming emergent scientists, is still very, very in a state of flux. People still do not seem to understand it. And I don't think it is helped by the fact that they said that they will need 2 weeks to understand it. I think that's the basis of all these hasty measures. I personally, but then I'm not a scientist, I don't see what difference it will make to just say people should not come in at all when the other measure had been effective. Having said it's been effective, there was also a noticeable rise in incidence of COVID-19. Maybe it was what goaded them to take that decision. I don't understand. I don't know the rationale, just like I cannot explain. But I'm only concerned about our response and the lack of response of Nigeria. As we condemn this apparently discriminatory policy, you discriminate not just between blacks and Africans and non-Africans, but those who are citizens and those who are residents, contra those who are not. But the question that, what's your own response? Is it wrong for any country to try to take proactive measures? No.
So, Prof, in terms of response,
what they are choosing.
Pardon me. So, in terms of response, let me just latch onto that quickly. In terms of response, because, I mean, you've said that what is our response now? So let me just ask you, because as it stands now, the UK has recorded over 200 cases of the new variant. Nigeria just has 3. So in terms of response, if Nigeria were to respond in kind, what will that response be, seeing that the UK has, hundreds of cases compared to 3, which Nigeria has?
How many people have been tested in Nigeria? So we have also to be very careful about statistics. That's probably one of the things they will take into consideration. How many people are tested? On a random, if you come in from our airport and get into the streets, what happens? I can tell you, if you go to what they get this trace and locate, or whatever they call it, if you come and you're quarantined, people are calling you all the time. People even want to know. They discover that sometimes you leave your telephone in your place of quarantine and step out. They devised other ways of checking if you're keeping to your quarantine. What is our own measure? Even at the height of COVID-19, if you get into the country, you just fill a form and you disappear. How many people trace you? So the fact that we have reported 3 does not necessarily mean we have 3. But I'm not using it to justify. I'm not using it to justify discriminatory measures. But I'm only saying, as I kept saying, that we put these things in boxes. We should have our own proactive measure instead of just being reactive. You should have a measure that assures the public, Nigerian public, that if this thing turns out to be dangerous, because nobody knows, we have your back, we are protecting you. It's not just to say because we are three, nothing will happen. What if it turns out to be dangerous?
So
that's why the race scientists.
You didn't quite answer the question, Prof. So I'm saying that what should our response be in the light of, I mean, I gave you
our
the figures,
response
and also,
is, that's what I'm saying, is leadership failure. We can decide to impose retaliatory, I won't use the word retaliatory, but it will not be out of place to say, look, if you come in, stay in identified hotels so that we monitor you for this period, 2 weeks. And just like they said, you pay for it. There must be something in place so that we can talk about negotiating.
But does that go with the principle of reciprocity? Does that go with the principle of reciprocity, Prof? Because, I mean,
no, this is not, which you know well. I would
Please go on.
I wouldn't use the word reciprocity in this context. Reciprocity maybe is quite a benign word. If you want to talk of revenge, that's a different thing. Reciprocity may be in international relations. If you want to treat, if you decide that the embassy in one country is like the extension of that country, then the reciprocity there is that it is expected that they would give the same measure of treatment to your country. But we are thinking of where we feel that we are unfairly picked upon. So what I think we should have done is for the country actually to have some measures and say, look, we are banning travels. Incoming flights are banned. If you are coming, or if we don't want to impose blanket ban as Morocco did and as Rwanda did, we can then say, identify a number of hotels. For this 2-week period, anybody coming in, isolate here so that we can monitor you. Because right now there's no effective monitoring for those who come in. Isolating this, pay for the cost of the testing so that we'll be able to trace and locate and make sure you stay the 10 days quarantine. That could be a measure, but we don't have any.
Sure that those who have been working seriously behind the scenes will not agree with you that there hasn't been effective monitoring or surveillance, because that question has been put to them quite a number of times. Whether or not it's effective as we want it to be, I guess that's the question. Well, let's speak to the science of this conversation, having spoken the economics and the politics of it. Dr. Maduka, has finally joined us only via a phone call right now. Well, quickly, before I get to my colleague's question, which he asked you earlier, what does the data say about the Omicron variant? What do we know about Omicron so far? Oh dear, thought we had her on phone or something, but I'm pretty sure we'll get back to that very quickly, very soon. Well, Mr. Fashua, back to the economics of this matter. The OPS, economists, everyone is raising the alarm over investment disruptions all over the place. The question that came to my mind earlier is, global economy is borderless. There are no borders anymore. But now, travel restrictions are in place. How significant is travel restrictions in a world where the global economy is borderless? Just as you said earlier, where literally the globe is literally struggling to get back on its feet, and now this has come again. It would seem there is more political or more economic than it is scientific. In terms of whether or not it's borderless, how significant is this, especially the reactions that the world is taking on this matter?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ayo. I mean, it has serious global implication. I want to say that, the world is finding out that some of the assumptions that were made and, the thing about what they call the new normal, is a bit premature. In September 2019, Boris Johnson was on the floor of the United Nations, and he gave an 18 minutes or 19 minute speech, where he talked about that some changes will be made to the world and the way we operate, and a lot more responsibility will be given to artificial intelligence and so on, and computers will determine the futures of people, who gets a house, who gets a credit, and all of that. And he advised then that if we were wise, that's the rest of us, we should speak up now so that some of the values of the traditional system will make it into the new normal system. That was September 2019, but by December 2019, the COVID hit, and the whole of 2020 became a COVID year for most countries. Okay, so now we're seeing that, look, perhaps some of those assumptions are premature. Perhaps the world is not ready for everything to be run remotely. Perhaps the world of working from home being and computers taking over. Perhaps we have to be careful about that. Perhaps the world is not even ready for green energy to run industries. I was in Zambia in 2016 at the African Development Bank meeting, and Akinwumi Adesina had a very bitter argument with an American woman who had come to say that, look, Africa should forget about the coal, forget about all of this dirty energy, and move into green energy. And Adesina said no, that he believes that if the United States and China and most of Europe is using their coal, African countries should also continue to use their coal.
Well, right? Mr. Fasha,
so when they started giving him problems,
my apologies. There are so many questions to ask, because one of the questions I was going to ask is, what should Africa's economic response be now, especially given that earlier in the year, even in the previous year or the past few years, many countries have been coming to Africa, and now this is happening. But I'll take you up on that one shortly. We have Dr. Maduka on phone now to have this conversation with her. Thank you so much again for joining us, Dr. Maduka. Before I go to my colleague's question earlier, the question that I want to ask you is, what is science saying about the Omicron variant right now? What's the recent information? What's the data saying about Omicron, in spite of the world's reaction to it?
Yeah, so while we don't know everything that there is to know about Omicron, there are a couple of things that have been emerging in the past few days. Since when it was first identified in Botswana, and then of course the sequencing was finalized in South Africa, what we are seeing, initially there were fears and concerns that it may be as virulent as the Delta variant. It may cause a very serious ill health. The ability for it to be transmitted could be quite high, and that's why it's a variant of concern. But what we're seeing over the past few days, hours in fact, is that we're getting reports that the cases are actually mild, and it hasn't increased the death rate appreciably in South Africa, where it has been identified. And so experts are saying this isn't really as much a source of concern with regards to deaths as we initially were worried that it could be. There is always room for cautious optimism with regards to the Omicron, but that doesn't mean that it is something that we should ignore or we shouldn't be concerned about. And hence, I believe that is why different countries are reacting in different ways to see if they could protect their citizens. So that's what we do so far.
Right, so Dr. Maduka, we've been here before, sort of. I mean, we're still dealing with the Delta variant, which is responsible for 99% of the cases we're seeing globally. In fact, in Europe, the spike we're seeing is as a result of the Delta variant. So we've dealt with the Alpha variant, the Beta variant, Delta variant before this new one. So we have a process, we have a mechanism of dealing with this. And I mean, that's why you hear about the testing, quarantine, and the rest. But for this latest decision we're seeing, and that's what I was asking earlier, what do we know about how travel restrictions affects or otherwise transmission rates? Does it really do much?
Okay, so theoretically, if you just think about it, the whole idea behind travel restrictions is keep the virus out of our borders. So the persons are purportedly carrying the virus. You don't let them get entry into your country. They can bring it in and spread it. But it's actually very interesting to also know that by the time a variant is identified, it's likely to have already spread. It's likely to have already crossed boundaries. I mean, we are in a global age and global economy and global travel. And with all these things, the science always may often be a step behind travel, economy, and people's movement. So by the time you've identified a virus and you've done the variant and you've done the sequencing and it takes a week or 2 weeks to come out, people have moved all over the place with it. So it's actually ridiculous to say you shut down your borders and that is the way you can protect. Let's go back and put quarantine measures back in place. Let's do the testing before travel. Let's do the quarantine after you arrive in the country. Those are better ways of being able to detect if someone may have the virus. And whether it is Omicron or it is Delta or it is Alpha or it is Beta, like you have said, the process is the same. It hasn't changed. It shouldn't change.
Is that in a way questioning the science behind some of the decisions that have been made by these countries, especially given the fact that a good number of those countries have very brilliant scientists?
So really, many of the decisions that are made by countries, fortunately or unfortunately, may not always be driven by science. We would wish that the scientists like us would have a voice in decision making, but it's not always so. So oftentimes countries react, well, you call it a knee-jerk reaction. Immediately, what do? Block people from coming, keep your citizens safe. But the science may not support that is the best way to go, and so sometimes scientists are crying even after these things have been put in place and saying, no, this isn't the right move. And I actually agree, as it is from what we know right now, that the quarantine measures are actually best suited for this situation, not restrictions.
I'll speak to one issue that was raised by one of our guests earlier, Professor in Abuja, that our surveillance system and possibly, testing and everything may not be as reliable as we want them to look. Consequently, he doesn't think that the restriction being placed on us by the UK and a number of other countries is out of place, given the weakness, if I can use that word, of our own surveillance system, of our testing and everything. Do you see any validity in that?
So we don't have a 100% foolproof system of surveillance of testing, whether it's with the rapid test kits or with the PCR. There's
or globally,
for
doctor.
Improvement. We do have loopholes, but I can't tell you that there are teams of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people even across the country working extremely hard to put these protocols in place. And if there are challenges with the protocols and the testing and all the measures in place for surveillance, it isn't necessarily with the implementers as much as it is with people not complying. The biggest headaches we've had are people trying to evade PCR testing before they travel, people trying to forge COVID-19 vaccination certificates, people trying to pay their way through rather than going to do the right thing. And this is the bane and the headaches that we are having. And if these issues were not there, we'll probably have been able to see a lot more success. But as in how we're doing the best that we can, and I think what we're doing should be adequate if Nigerians cooperate. So it isn't really a justification for travel restrictions, because really the way it works is that you do testing on two borders. You do testing in your country and you do testing when you arrive. So there's pre-departure testing and then there's post-departure testing, whether you want to put it immediately or you want to put it a few days after you arrive. So both countries have responsibilities in this regard. So you can't really put it all on our issues and our challenges that we do actually admittedly have a few of those and say that then that means that we should be hit with travel restrictions. Remember, there are countries where this Omicron virus already exists and it's already, I don't see travel restrictions from those countries. It seems like it's too easy to just say South Africa that actually discovered this variant in the first place. Botswana shut you down while other European countries or Mediterranean countries that already, I'm very, very sure, have this circulating as community transmission. Nothing is being done about it.
Well, Doctor, we'll take a short break right now. There's still so much to unpack in all the conversation that we're having on this Omicron variant, so please stay with us. Well, thank you again for staying with us. Dr. Maduka, so the conversation is endless now. You talked about the fact that people are not complying. Well, you're a consultant public health physician. What are the shortfalls that we have? Is it in the area of giving information to people or persuading people, getting the right responses from them? What exactly are the challenges we're having in that regard?
Is getting people to comply.
Please go on, madam.
Okay, so the challenges that we're having is getting. I think I'm.
Well, sincere apologies about that. We're so hoping that we'll be able to get her to see her face as well. But let's continue this conversation in Abuja right now. Just before I throw to Mark, well, Prof, the conversation is that you heard a response to some of the issues that you have raised about our own effectiveness or lack of it in doing the needful. How do you react to that?
Well, I'm not saying we don't have such measures, but many of people who have traveled out of this country, on coming back, just ask anybody how many times have efforts been made, have you been contacted to know where you are? To give you an example of what happens in the UK, if you go to a restaurant, a typical restaurant, they take some of your details. In fact, you might be somewhere. 1 week later, you get an alert on your phone that somebody who had come to that restaurant had tested positive to COVID-19. You should go and get tested. So if you arrive, when you quarantine, you have this trace and locate. I've forgotten exactly what they call it. But your phone will constantly be ringing, and you don't know when it rings. And I discussed with some people when I was in the UK the last time and found out that people try to beat that system. You leave your phone because you give the address of where you're quarantined. So you can leave your telephone number and take a walk, and it will call, the phone will ring and still show that you're in the location. But then they devised a way of trying. Some of them will pay a visit to wherever you said you're quarantined. So these are what I mean, the measures. Here, once you come into this country, you are supposed to quarantine. But ask, I'm sure many of you have traveled, how many people get quarantined when they return? How many people try to reach you to find out whether you are even being in quarantine? We don't have that. Or at least in my own experience, the times I've traveled, nobody has tried to contact me. And that's the experience of my colleagues and friends. So we have to take this. These are part of the lapses we have in our system. And the foreigners coming into this country, they also know there are lapses in terms of, tracing you to make sure that you're effectively being quarantined.
Well, that is true. Do we then, because what we have now been told is that this is not scientific. I mean, that's at least from our own.
But other countries, they observe it. They have scientists in their own country.
Yes,
too.
you heard Dr. Maduka there, who also said that oftentimes the scientists are not listened to. You saw the conflict between even the pronouncements of Dr. Fauci and then you as President Donald Trump, and the conflict and between science and politics.
Even within the same medical field, they will not agree. Even within the same field, political science or economics, you will not agree.
But even logically, I mean, even speaking logically, where people who reside...
You can argue this, that if you're a leader there is the pulse of the people. I was following a response to the UK measures. One of the reactions, one lady decided to gather signatures to protest. Their protest was not about banning people, but they were protesting that people who come in should be allowed to quarantine in their homes, not in hotels that is too expensive. So you wonder that you pander again to your public. Sometimes the things you say, that's what leaders do. These things you ponder to the emotions of the public.
So considering the emotions of Nigerians right now about this and the emotions of world leaders who have spoken on it, what should Nigeria's stance be if you were to advise the president or the emotions of the minister?
On the emotional grounds, I can understand why analysts can come and lampoon, criticize Britain for being racist. But it will be difficult for me to understand it, why a high commissioner would do that as a diplomat.
Yeah, but you heard him. I mean, he was only re-echoing what the UN Secretary General had said. And those were pretty strong words for UN Secretary General to say.
I can tell you one thing that I feel happens in what they call third worldism. For people who have spent a lot of their time living outside the country, it's when you make certain projections like that, it becomes more difficult even for you to make an inroad.
No, what I'm saying is, right now, looking at the emotions of Nigeria's in-house, and their emotions are not baseless.
Okay.
It's based also on logic. The fact that if you're a UK citizen living in Nigeria, the restrictions don't affect you. But if you're a Nigerian and you need to travel to the UK...
The restrictions affect you if you're a resident. But the only thing is that you can come in and quarantine.
Exactly.
So the others cannot come in at all.
Exactly.
So if you are criticizing the UK, why don't you criticize Morocco?
Does the virus discriminate in that regard?
No, but that's their own measure. Why are you not criticizing Morocco? Why are you not criticizing Rwanda for taking these similar measures?
But the point I was trying to make is based on how we now, because what we have magnified and we've chosen to magnify, and for obvious reasons, I do not know how many Nigerians travel to Morocco.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But I know of how many Nigerians travel to the UK, at least who had plans for the UK this Christmas.
Yeah, it is legitimate. We can air our grounds.
Based on that, what should be the stance of the Nigerian government? That's what I'm asking.
I've said that if I were to say, I will expect the High Commissioner maybe to get in contact with the British government. The kind of grandstanding is not for diplomats. That's the point I was trying to make. Even if you say re-echoing somebody, watch the response of Britain when they said, this is what Nigeria said. He said, if Nigeria said that statement is unfortunate. That's the diplomatic language. So a high commissioner, a diplomat in that sense, we will expect maybe take it up, arrange a meeting. Maybe if you want the public to know what you're doing, say, I am going to have a meeting. I'm arranging to have a meeting with so and so my somebody in high up in the British government to discuss the issue. I don't need to come around and say, okay, you're racist, because then you foreclose any...
So we shouldn't expect a response from our Foreign Affairs Minister on this?
The response doesn't mean to be for the public gallery. When your High Commissioner says, I am going to take this thing up with the British government.
What I'm saying is, Nigeria's foreign affairs, we've heard from the Minister for Information. Should we expect a response from Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs?
There will be a response, but I will be very surprised if the Foreign Affairs Minister responds in the manner in which Lai Mohammed was said to have responded. I'll be surprised if he does that.
But we should expect a response.
Yeah, there will be a response.
Well, let me come to you, Dr. Fashwa, on this. I do not know what your closing remarks will be. We've listened to the politics, we've listened to the science. What does the economics have to say?
Well, anyhow, but first of all to say that, in this age of the new normal, people, let's not be intimidated by any science. Anybody can get any science anywhere, and on YouTube you can train yourself. You can, look, I just think, anyhow, so there's so much you can learn. Okay, so nobody can bamboozle us. And of course, as he said, we've also seen clashes even within the medical field. In this COVID time, we saw things that we never knew existed before, that even medicine does not agree with itself, and so on. Then again, I wanted to say that the dystopian future, where people will be will be targeted, and people will be checking on them, seeing whether they took one step beyond where they should. It's as if you're having a brace, like these braces that they put on prisoners abroad. That's what we're talking about, which is a dystopian future, which is now the reality in those countries. If that's what they want, let them want it. We in Africa, we in Nigeria, we have other existential issues to deal with. We know our problems, all right? We can't afford to close down our economy for now, okay? And this is where it's at, and that's why people are actually reacting. Again, I also want people to understand.
So you don't want us to close our borders?
No, if we wanted to react, okay, if we wanted to react, I'll say, listen, let's keep our borders open. Let's step up. Let's go to Ghana and learn what they're doing in the airport. It's unbelievable. I'm telling you, Ghanaians are so organized. It's unbelievable. You get there, you weep for your country. And then you come here and all they do is beg, beg, beg. Everybody beggars, in our airport. So I wanted to point attention to the fact that, look, what do you think the reaction of our people will be, those who have not been vaccinated, to this kind of knee-jerk reaction? So they would does it put them off, or does it endear them to go and get vaccinated? I've been double vaccinated. I don't believe I need a booster. But we're hearing that they've also approved boosters. But I'm saying to people, please ensure you live before you die. Once you start living in fear of, hey, all those hypochondriacs, yeah, as good as dead. You know what I'm saying? So, but we have a life to live. We have a country to fix. We have a country in Nigeria to fix and to ensure that this country does not implode. All right, and that's what I think we should keep our minds on. What has been done? The Westerners are a lot more scientific than what they have done. This is a knee-jerk reaction, and they need to be given this feedback, which people like us who are not in government are perhaps in a better position to tell them that this is what it is. A lot of plans to be, and again, I want to say, how expensive it is to quarantine people. How many people can afford to spend £5,000 just sitting in a room? And what about the mental effects on people? People are feeling a lot more suicidal these days, a lot more suicide since the time this COVID. The management of COVID from day one promoted suicide, promoted destruction of relationships. Families have collapsed and what have you. You know what I'm saying? It's a time that we need to forget about and move on. It's about flu. Remember that even according to the CDC, all right, very bad flu seasons, you have 1 million people dying in a year.
We also know that this country will be approaching their own flu season, and
exactly.
Perhaps they want to.
And it comes twice a year.
But I understand that, just as we wrap up now, that my colleague has just one more question for you.
Wanted to put to you earlier about foreign countries, European countries that have been coming to Africa, even Asian countries as well. In the light of this travel apartheid, as at least 3 individuals representing major institutions in the world have spoken travel apartheid. How do you see? What would you suggest that Africa should do in response going forward? We know that it's a global village, it's a global economic village, and all of that. But in the light of the fact that at the end of the day, it's to your tent, O Israel. Everyone seems to bear their burdens. Given that everyone wants to come to Africa to invest, and this is the challenge that we have on our hands, and everyone is locking out Africans, how should Africa be responding?
Well, economically speaking, I believe Africa should lock them out as well. Nigeria should lock them out if possible. They can travel down here for whatever, but they know the access. The Western world knows the access they've had to African economy, especially Nigerian economy. We study their economics. We are immersed in their ideology. Everybody running our government believes in neoliberal economics and all of that stuff. So now is the time for us to first of all think for ourselves. We need to think for ourselves. We need to know our own strength. We need to begin to produce ourselves. And I will say that we need to align more with places like China. At least with China, we see some of the things that they're building on ground. We have airports to show for it. We have train stations to show for it. They're not 100%. Certainly not 100%. Give them 60%. They exploit us. They do all of that. But we see what they're building from. I ask people to show me what we have built from the interaction with the West in the last couple of decades. Nothing. You can't show anything. Since they built Murtala Mohammed Airport, I know that we should be building those things ourselves. That's the first thing. But the way we are, how many Nigerians are ready to do the hard work? Even our youth. Everybody's looking for soft work. Do we understand what it takes to build a country, to build a nation, the sheer back-breaking hard work? Are we ready? No. Our leaders are there. Everybody's enjoying, buying big cars, traveling everywhere in the world and all of that. The reason why this thing is painful for many of them is because they wanted to start jetting up and down. For me, since COVID has come, I'm ready to zero my mind and stay in Nigeria till the end of time. You know, we have what it takes. Let's spend our holidays here, but do we have the security to do that? Let's put our government under pressure to create the security so that we spend our money in our country and all of these things. And then when it comes to time, they will beg us to come to this country. I believe it can be done. And let's align. Let's have, you know, tangibles coming from the East as well. Let's realign politically. Let's go to the Middle East and see what they can do for us in this part. That's what I think.
Well, on that note, and it's a very fine place to leave it, gentlemen, we have to thank you for your contributions to the program this morning. We've been speaking with Professor Jidofo Adibe, who is the Professor of Political Science and International Relations. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily. And Dr. Tokwe Fashua, who is an economist and feels very passionately about these matters as well. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily. Well, we also had Dr. Mosiri Maduka, who is a consultant public health physician. Sadly, we couldn't get her closing comments. Technology, would we say technology failed us here? But if she can hear us, thank you so much for coming on as well, Doctor. We'll have to leave it at this point. We'll take a break right now, and hopefully we should be able to bring you just one more perspective before we leave. Please stay with us.
We're joined by Professor Emmanuel Oshodeke, who is the President of Academic Staff Union of Universities. It's good to have you on the program, Prof. I know that on November the 15th, 3 weeks ago, you gave that ultimatum, 3-week ultimatum to the federal government. And in your words, you said that if nothing is done, then ASUU will go on strike. So does that mean ASUU is effectively on strike as we speak?
Well, you are quoting me wrongly. That wasn't exactly what we said. What we said is that we are giving government 3 weeks to resolve the problem. If they don't, at the end of 3 weeks, we need to take an action. That's what we said. We didn't mention about the strike or not, but it's part of the options which my union will need to decide, our members, our branches will need to decide.
Well, I'm actually quoting you, and this is what you said. We're giving the federal government a 3-week ultimatum. If after 3 weeks they don't meet our demands, we will be going on strike. So are you saying you meant to say that you will be consulting with your members and deciding on what to do? So that means you're not on strike right now.
Maybe, okay, maybe you are quoting some of the media, not us. Our NEC met and said we are giving government 3 weeks to implement the issue we reached an MOA and MOU. After that 3 weeks, the union will meet to take an action, further action. That's what we said. We didn't mention strike. Our strike, we have procedure for going on strike. The principal officers of the union, the national officer don't have the power to call for a strike. It is the members, starting from the branch. Our union, our activity starts up, down, not down, up. So that is exactly where we are. The 3 weeks ended on Sunday, and we met on Sunday, and we are going back to our branches as usual. You should know our procedure now. For them to give us the mandate of what we should do. What type of action should we take now that the 3 weeks has expired?
Right, so if you say you're not on strike, what is the situation with your demands with government? 6 of them. How many have been met? And
okay, thank you. As at now, only 1 out of the 6 items have been partly implemented. That is the revitalization fund, where they told us they had released 20 billion to some of the universities that passed, they were successful in the process of evaluating what they want to do with the money. I think that's the level they have done. All of that they have not implemented. Even after the intervention of several bodies, after the union have been so patient with them since August, and we believe that now that they have refused to implement it, we are going back to our branches to start the process of what we will do at the end of that process.
Well, Prof, when you say one has been met, only one has been met halfway, and we also understand from available information that the Minister of Labor and Employment has said that he is also going to review the process. Is there any meeting in the offing with any of the authorities?
No, they've not reached out to us. If you can recall, that in August, they gave us the same promise that by the end of August, they will implement all those 6 items. And because of that, we went to our NEC, our National Executive Council meeting, and reported, and they said, good, let's give them the 3 months, the end of August. They didn't implement anyone. We met again in October, and they said, by the end of October, all those items will be implemented from number 1 there to number 6, and that they will be implemented with timelines, and none was implemented. So that's why in October, we met with the Chief of Staff. He said he will intervene, and it was not resolved. You also recall, we met with the Minister of Labor. He was a conciliator. When they also all agreed that they were going to implement them, they were not. Then we met the Speaker of the House of Assembly, the National House of Representatives. He invited us and all the parties, and we met, and they all told us that a week after that meeting, which 3 weeks ago, that all those issues will be resolved. But now it's 3 weeks after that date, and none of them have been fully resolved, which means that it's a deliberate attempt. So whatever the minister is saying, we will not take him serious because they have said it before and they didn't implement.
So what now is the next line of action? You have said that there is a process to ASUU taking any decision or any action in the light of this. The only decision or the only action that people have feared over time has been the strike. What other options are there if not strike?
Well, there are so many options. One is that we expect the public to ask the government to implement what they have promised to do since August. Actually, since January 2021. Remember, when we call off our strike, they should go ahead and implement them as a promise. And nobody will be talking about strike. As a union, we don't love strike. We are forced to go on strike. And I think for once, the government should ensure that they do what they have promised to, that they will do since January this year. That's a year now, almost a year now. They should implement them so that they're not talking about strike.
Prof, the Ministry of Labor and Employment is just like a conciliator. The real institution, that should be taking this head on should be the Ministry of Education, isn't it? What's the Ministry of Education saying about this matter?
Well, we need to know the function of the conciliator. It's like a judge. You invite all the parties to a meeting, and with you as the chairman, and in your meeting there, everybody agree that they will do X, Y, Z. Is it not? It's also the function of that Minister of Labor to ensure that that thing is conciliated, is implemented, not just the Minister of Education. Are you following?
Well, is that in any way?
When the conciliator comes in, the central body is not the Minister of Labor, not Education. It is the duty of the Minister of Labor to enforce the Minister of Education, the Minister of Finance, to ensure that, and then the minister, to ensure that these things are done. We are also trying to relate with the Minister of Labor, but they don't get it back to us. They don't answer our call. They don't call us for meeting. That is where we are. So it's not just about Minister of Labor. We are also trying to get in touch with Minister of Education, Minister of Finance, and they're not doing what they should do. So if anybody precipitating a strike or any action, these 3 ministries should be held responsible. Ministry of Education, Ministry of Finance, NITDA, and the Ministry of Labor, Minister of Labor. They should be held responsible.
So, Prof, as we wind down on this, quite a lot to unpack, and I do hope we'll do that in the coming days. But So the Ministry of Finance is playing a major role in this as well, because this is essentially about funds, monies, in terms of payments, revitalization funds, and the rest. But on a big picture now, on that note, I'd like to wind down on this. I recall that this ultimatum came some days after President Buhari was outside of the country, and he spoke quite highly about the educational system, saying that Nigerians are doing quite well around the world, and that's because of the good education they get here in Nigeria. And for a lot of people listening, the picture they will imagine is that the education sector in Nigeria is good at different levels. But at the level you operate, just how good are things such that you decided to go on this journey?
Thank you. Whatever the president said outside the country is just, as far as I'm concerned, is just to create the impression that everything is working, which is not working, is not correct. Maybe I expect even our colleagues in the press to go around the universities. As I speak to you, in one of the first generation university, they were using stove as a bouncing burner. We went to one of the higher rated state university, 16 female students were staying in a 3x3 meter room, and each have a stove. If you go to one of the university, students were having lectures in what looked like a stadium. You can do that. I think you want a channel to do this. This is what we expect from you. Go to university, you see students sitting on the bare floor, hanging on window, having lectures. You have a laboratory that can take 10 people. You have 1,000 students. Would you have a better education in such a level? We will not. And the apex of education anywhere in the world is the university, which is universal. The condition you have in the university in Nigeria should be what you have in US, because it's universal. The product can work anywhere. But in Nigeria, what you do, the politicians now today are busy proliferation universities when they are not funding those they have. In those countries, look at the budgetary allocation to education. In the 60s and 70s, I will budgeted more than 30% of budget to education. Here we are giving 5.6, the lowest in the world. And the president is saying that we are doing well. Those who are doing well, they are doing well because they have gone outside and be exposed to better training facilities and what have you. And those who were trained when Nigerian universities were working, up to 1980s, early 80s and late 80s, our universities were functioning properly. Students were coming from outside the country, and our lecturers were going outside and lecturers are coming in. Well, but then it does not happen.
So this is what we'll do, Prof.
My department, they were lecturers from 4 different countries teaching in one department.
Right,
is this there today?
We're totally out of time, but this is what we'll do. This is an issue that we'll definitely take up in the coming days, and we'll look forward to having you and, of course, to hear what the decision is eventually. But we'd like to thank you so much for the little time you spent with us. Professor Emmanuel Oshudeke is the president of ASUU. He's also professor of soil chemistry, Michael Okpara, University of Agriculture, Umudike. He joins us from Abia State this morning. So clearly, it's a developing story, and we'll keep following this one.
Well, perhaps an update to this would be to listen to Political Paradigm coming up right after this program. Guess who the guest is? Dr. Chris Ngige, Minister of Labor and Employment. Maybe he'll be able to answer some of the questions that have been raised by Professor Shudeke on our program this morning. Well, I guess that's the much of Sunrise Daily we can take today. Thank you so much for watching and for giving us your day, your morning, and face the rest of it. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, we don't mind the whole day, actually. Stay with us on Channels Television with all the breaking news and the latest for you. I'm Kayode Okikulu.
Should we say yes, we're greedy like that? Thank you so much for watching. I'm Malkwe Ogun Yusuf.